Thank you. We learned the last couple of days that Denmark is irrelevant. I would argue that yes, we are, but what we do is not irrelevant. And we often think in Denmark that what we do is an example for the world to follow. But I'll tell you a story about biodiversity where Denmark is not something to follow. I'll talk about the global, I'll talk about the local, and how the local impact the global. I was also thrilled with Carsten's introduction. It takes a little bit of my part. But 18 years ago, I issued a press release with the EU Commission and the EU Presidency where we were working on setting up the United Nations Panel for Biodiversity. And we issued a press release where I went on record stating that the biodiversity crisis was much larger than the climate crisis. I got enormously attacked by biologists. Our field is not relevant. The climate is important. But the other point that comes here is that, as Catherine explains, they are interlinked. We can't look at them in isolation from each other, and I'll talk a little bit about how biodiversity and ecosystems links into climate also in the end. The other thing we need to realize is that this is our home. It's a biological planet. We live on it. We use the resources. It's not that we live on another planet and what we do on Earth stays on Earth and it does not impact us. Everything we do in changing the ecosystems and the climate that impacts our home and our resources will affect us. And I think that during Corona, we also discovered that we humans are biological organisms. We're not independent of what happens. We live in a time of biodiversity crisis. It's immense. We are about to lose 20% of the world species in a glimpse. We lost 70% of all individuals of life on Earth. And we have distorted or destroyed or impacted or changed 70% of Earth's ecosystems. And we're mainly doing that because we need space for agriculture, forestry, roads, materials for cities, etc., etc. We are extracting resources from nature. We need it and we're destroying it at the same time. And I'll come back to how it's not sustainable. When EU was very mandatory setting up the United Panel for Biodiversity, we also got an EU strategy. And Ursula von Leyen went out and said on record, it's time to fix our broken relationship with nature, climate change, and loss of biodiversity, and the spread of devastating pandemics. Pandemics is linked directly to biodiversity loss. So she is linking them. But she also made another point, and that is that nature provides for business about 50% of the gross national product in the earth that we are using. It's super important for our societies and us. So basically, biodiversity has a link to climate. It has a link to water. We only have half the amount of clean water left on Earth per human. Water is super important for health, it's super important for production. We can't make beer without clean water. And we're losing clean water. It's super important for food productions. We lost 20% of all the topsoil on the earth to do agriculture. And it's linked to diseases. The World Economic Forum goes out every year and asks boards of big companies, the chairman of boards and the CEOs of big companies, what are the risks for the near future and the longer term? So the short term is not surprisingly geoeconomic confrontations, and we've seen that even speed up. But when they ask about the longer term, it's a green topic that comes up. It is the extreme weather events, it's biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, and it's critical change to the Earth system. Why is that? It's because if you're sitting in a big company looking into the future, you know you depend on a constant supply of resources. We're losing the resources. And you also want predictability. So we can't have this that flips one way and the other way. And the last thing is that you need the support of the public and politicians. That's your license to operate. This is why it keeps coming up year after year for these big companies. And we're doing something about it. We've got a United Nations COP agreement on biodiversity. And Catherine mentioned the Chinese. I just want to say, this is the most radical and extreme agreement, COP agreement, much more extreme than the climate change. And it came under leadership of China. China pushed it through to Canada. They're looking at this in a holistic way. I think we need to step up in the Western world and not work in the silos. We also in the EU have a biodiversity agreement. One of the things is that if we want all these ecosystem functions and services, we need to have ecosystem that works. And we have made a decision to set aside 30% of the world land and ocean areas for protected nature. Try to stop and think a little bit. 30% of the Earth, that's a lot. It's dramatic changes. And we can see the discussion in Denmark about nature national parks, which is tiny, 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 tiny areas. And we're going berserk over the changes. We're talking about that we need to do 30%. And if we zoom in on Denmark, the first report we did in Biodiversity Council was that we looked at the amount of protected areas. How close are we to the 30% target that we promised the world and promised the EU that we contribute to? And we have on land about 70% protected areas. When we went through them and looked at, are they really protected? Are they really nature? We cut it down to less than 2%. That's because a huge part of what we call protected are agricultural fields or production forest. They're gas stations, it's golf courses. We're reporting everything in. When we went 15 years back, we even reported in the inner ice shield on Greenland as protected areas as our contribution to take care of biodiversity in the world. We have the least protected areas in Denmark, but the quality of it is also the worst. This is a complicated graph. Green is that nature, where it is in good condition, and we are in the bottom together with Belgium, about 6%. So we have the least protected areas, and we have the lowest quality. And it is linked to how we use resources and how we use land. And that's agriculture. We are the country with the most agriculture in the world. We praise ourselves to that we are very efficient. We're not. We really have an insufficient use of area with our agriculture. But if you look at the resources we're using, this is the Earth. We're basically right now using about 1/2 of Earth's resources every year. We're basically reducing the capital every year. And the prediction is that it will go up to 2.5 if we don't change anything. But just to look at that, we can't say that we're doing a good job in Denmark. This is the Danish impact. I'm just going to scroll in. We're about using 5 times Earth's resources. We're not pulling over our weight, we're using over our weight. And here's a link to the globe. We have a lot of production in Denmark. We always argue that we're very good on climate-friendly productions, all of that. That's because we don't count into our climate impact outside of Denmark. But there's immense impact outside of Denmark that impact biodiversity and climate. A lot of the meat consumption and production we have in Denmark and the Western world is destroying global biodiversity and climate. 60% of global biodiversity loss comes from land, especially in tropics, turned into cleared for meat-based diets. This is soya production. Denmark is proportionally the country in the world that gets most of the soya from the Amazon resulting in cutting down Amazonian forest. And if I remove this little 60%, this is sustainable because there's something left. I'm not kidding you. This is listed as sustainable soya production. So just because you go down and see, oh, this is sustainable, don't believe it. It's sustainable in the sense that it's licensed to continue to do business as usual. If we link into, Amazon is home to enormous amount of biodiversity. We also heard Pete very nicely explain how the circulation of water and generation of water and the trees is all linked in. When we're cutting the forest in the Amazon, we are approaching a tipping point. The tipping point is that if the humidity level is not continued to be produced, it will not regenerate the forest to produce it, and it will flip into dry savanna. We've seen this several times in the Earth's history. Now this is scary because we have destroyed about 20%, and scientists is arguing over whether the flipping point is 25% or 30%, but we're close. Amazon is the largest terrestrial carbon stock in the world. It used to be a carbon sink, helping us, mitigating the climate impact. Now it's a climate source. But if it flips to savanna, and what we know from the past is that can go within 10 years, some scientists have calculated that it will increase global temperature by 1 degree. Super quick. This is why there's a lot of people like Catherine and others, and Peter, that is arguing we need to be interested in these flipping points. And it is, the burning down, and it's not the Brazilian, it's the Brazilian that burns it down to supply the Western world with meat. That's basically what's going on. When this happens, and when we get less humidity, all of the agriculture in South Africa depends on the humidity that's created in the Amazon. When that goes down, they will face agricultural crisis. The same system goes up with humidity to California. We saw some fire pictures from California, and it goes to Australia. So basically, our pig production in Denmark is contributing to changing the impact of possibilities of having agriculture in South America. It impacts Australia and California. Tiny bit, but we're pulling our weight to contribute to it. And just the last slide, we share this planet with biodiversity. Life is beautiful, it's diverse, a lot of wonderful organisms. We destroyed most of nature in Denmark. We forgot what we used to have. We know about the white stork, but who knows about the black stork? That used to be a species in Denmark. It's not like the white stork that it goes out on the fields and eats grasshoppers. It lives inside a forest up in a tree. We don't have it because we basically remove all natural forest in Denmark. We will get it back if we start getting natural forest back in Denmark. Thank you.